32 minutes on our clock, and it'll start here in just a few seconds, and then we will be underway on this new podcast. So here we go, 32 minutes starting now. And of course, we're big Penn State fans, football most specifically. And Tim, boy, the season's coming up here for Penn State football. We're really trying to put last year's in the rearview mirror. It was a tough one to kind of stomach. And for you have a lot of close ties to Penn State. So you've got to be excited about this year. You've got to be looking forward to getting rid of last year. How are you feeling as Penn State football is just about here?
I'm feeling a little bit better than I did this time last year. Of course, we had COVID hanging over us. The season started late. It was only a Big Ten schedule, Chad. The one thing it taught me about last season, where they started out 0-5, it was their worst start of a season since 1889, when they wore actually pink and black instead of the blue and white back then. They were pink and black. But every play, you have to play as hard as the previous one. Of course, the Indiana game, we all remember, Chad. I remember you and I talking about it, whether the 2-point conversion was good or not. And I think you were listening to it on the radio, you told me, correct?
Yeah, well, I still think it wasn't good. I didn't get to see it until later, but we're in the car, we're going to get ice cream. That game was so torturous. I had to get out of the house. It was causing family issues. I was like, if we don't
oh my God. Family issue.
It's going to affect my marriage. So we had to get out of there. It's on the radio, and they're like, okay, Indiana scored, but they're going for 2. And I'm like, they're going for 2? And then it's like, is it in? Is it out? And of course, the controversial call that it was in. And boy, that was just such a terrible way to start the season. And I almost checked out right there, to be honest. I mean, it just wasn't really, at that point, it was just like, well, this is a COVID year. I'm not interested anymore. So this year I am looking forward to kind of getting back on track.
The game where I mostly checked out, of course, I watched every game, but the next week they played Ohio State. I think everyone just said they're going to lose that game anyway. But the third game where they got shellacked by Maryland, and that was the game that did it for me. Like, what is going on with this team? But to their credit, they continued on. And really, when you look at that season last year, one of your favorite guys when he was coming out of high school, Sean Clifford, you look at that Penn State offense, they were number 2 in the Big Ten last year. Hard to believe, but he had a great receiver in Dotson, who's coming back next year. But he also had a guy looking behind his back, Will Levis. He's gone to Kentucky. So it is now the Sean Clifford show up in Happy Valley, Chad.
I was beating the drum for Sean Clifford, last year. I thought he was going to have a fantastic year. He had matured in the system and as a football player, and it just never happened. And at one point I was just out on Sean Clifford, but he's back. So I got to get back on the Sean Clifford train. We'll see how it goes here. New offensive coordinator, which you seem to be excited about. I'm kind of in a wait and see with that. And the beginning of their schedule is so tough. I mean, they're starting at Wisconsin on September 4th. Then Ball State comes in. Then you got the whiteout on the 18th against Auburn. You could potentially be 1-2, worst case scenario, 0-3 there. And it would be back to, last year. Let's hope it's not. But I mean, you're kind of excited about this offensive coordinator and the offense.
I am. Well, of course, he coached Baker Mayfield and a lot of other players out there. He hails from Pennsylvania. Hard to believe, though, that James Franklin pulled the trigger on the previous offensive coordinator. So James Franklin has pushed everything in, as I say, push all the cheese in. He is going and really going to have an up-tempo Penn State offense. But, Chad, everyone looks at, okay, you've got Wisconsin and you've got Auburn. Sandwich in between there is Ball State. Who's Ball State? They won the MAC last year, and they've got a lot of players back, and you cannot rest. What really scares me is if Penn State wins at Wisconsin, because I think they're going to come back on a high, Chad, and they may take Ball State for granted, and they could be 1-1, but it's not the games that you expected them to win and lose.
I know, it'd be all for naught if you go in and you play Wisconsin tough, and then you slip up against Ball State, and those kind of games just ruin your season. You've got Ohio State late, so you'd love to cruise into that, somewhere in the range of 6-0, 7-0, 6-1, boy, and just be hot. We'll see. And that Auburn game, by the way, the whiteout with fans back, I think that's going to be electric.
We will have first time now there's going to be 2 whiteout games.
What's the other one again? Remind people.
Valley, against Michigan.
They want to get Michigan again. I'll never forget what was that 2019's whiteout. Michigan comes out and they literally had to call a timeout before the game. Oh, that was spectacular. I will never forget that. It was such a cool moment and such credit to the Penn State fans. That's November 13th. That's like the third to last game of the year. So,
well, listen to these running backs. They have a Baylor transfer. His name is John Lovett. 1,800 yards he rushed for on a good Baylor Bears team last year. Kevon Lee is going to be a sophomore. Don't forget, they got Noah Cain coming back after an injury. Ford was hurt on the first game last year, coming back. Those are four and five-star running backs that Sean Clifford is going to have to throw, to give the ball out of the backfield, little swing passes, jet sweeps, of course, Dotson. Do you think that Clifford has just got to manage the game more than force it like he was doing last year?
Oh, I mean, that running back core is a stud after stud. And, if the receivers step up, they always have great tight ends. If you can figure out the offensive line, I don't think the offense is going to be the issue. And I think Clifford hopefully learned and had some humble pie served to him, at some point last year, worked hard. And the defense, I think, is also going to be there. So I do think Penn State comes out and has a good season. Now, Wisconsin's no joke. We'll see what happens against Wisconsin. But yeah, I hope that Clifford steps up and in his last year there really does a nice job. We went over our first, quarter time. Like the buzzer has been sounding.
The buzzer sounded. All right.
30 seconds now. So let's hit stop there, boy, and take a break and take a breath. Boy, we could just get going on Penn State football there, Tim.
Wow.
I am excited, though. I'll say while we have the time stopped that I am excited for James Franklin to kind of get the troops back on track and kind of put his fingerprints back on this team and have a winning season. Because, boy, a losing season in Happy Valley sucks.
It does.
And hopefully you're going down to the sidelines, right? Hopefully back this year to catch.
I'll be the sidelines. I won't be there for game one. I have a prior commitment that I made a long time ago, but I'll be there. For the Auburn game, I have my credentials all ready to go, my parking pass where I get to park about 100 yards from the stadium. So it's one of the advantages I get. But, yeah, I love it down there. I want to tell you, though, one of my big thrills was a couple of years ago where I got to see Joe Jonas on the sidelines, got a picture taken with him. I got a selfie. The funny part about that is I was on Joe Jonas's Instagram feed, his live feed, because he sung a song between the first and second quarters, and I was standing almost right next to him. One of my daughter's friends texted her during the game and said, "Your dad is live on his Instagram feed." So I am the coolest dad ever.
Your dad's actually cool. Look at that.
That's cool. That's right.
That's so cool. Well, good for you. I hope you enjoy that. We'll check back, when we talk more about that and see how all that is going. And hopefully Penn State is above 500 to start the season. People are going to have an aneurysm